So hello everybody, it's the 4th of October, again in Baranovici, 2022. It's a little after 7 in the evening time. I'm hoping you can see me. I hope it's not poor quality footage here. But anyway, to go over some of the interesting news, one of the most interesting things was some comments that made by Elon Musk. He was stating how he believes that that peace can be brought to between Ukraine and Russia, and very relevant information. For example, he mentions that Crimea has essentially belonged to Russia, through all history. I think he was mentioning since 1783, from Catherine the Great time, but probably even before that. Maybe there was a time when it wasn't Russian, right before that, but I think even before 1783 it belonged to Russia. And even during the time when it was administratively attached to the region of Ukraine, it was still essentially Russian. I remember even seeing on television footage where these people that live in Crimea were protesting, and they were locking their arms or tied together and protesting at the base, at the military base or a naval base in Crimea, because they didn't want to be a part of Ukraine. Even then, I mean, the people have never really wanted to be part of Ukraine, at least the Crimeans. And as a matter of fact, you could say any of those Russian-speaking areas, because the Ukrainians didn't treat them very well, so they didn't like them. And there's a lot of, and I'm not saying all Ukrainians. Again, I don't want to always say all Ukrainians, because probably the majority of them just looked at all Russians just as equal as they are Ukrainians. But then there's this group, and you can go back in history and find out more about this. It's very shocking. But you can look up Bandera, and then you can see what happened after World War II with Bandera, and how they used Bandera and his network as spies against Russia. And, Bandera hated, he said he hated communism, but he actually hated Russians. He actually probably hated even Ukrainians, but he was from Galicia, and Galicia was essentially also a part of Poland, and that is the part of Ukraine today that the Polish people claim, or the Polish government anyway. And so that's just an interesting history. And after World War II, the CIA was using him, and other intelligence agencies. First, the Germans were using him during World War II, because he was a Nazi. He was far more Nazi than any German was. So he really hated Jews, massacred. It's not even any clear, how do I say this? Clear evidence that that the Nazi Germans at that time were actually massacring Jews, even though history is pointing to that. There's a lot of history that points somewhere a little bit different. Even Jewish scholars have come out and said a lot of that information is fake information. However, when you look at Bandera and his people, he really did hate Jews, and he did really massacre Jews. And of course, he hated Poles. He massacred Poles. He hated Belarusians. He massacred Belarusians. As a matter of fact, he even massacred lots of Ukrainians. So this was a very nasty guy, and even the Germans, I think, didn't like him. So they had him in prison for a lot of the time when he was actually doing things. And here in Baranovici, for example, I made a video, and they were bringing people from the Czech Republic and massacring them here. They're putting them in, and just executing them at gunpoint. So Bandera was not a very nice guy. And if you listen to any of the videos from Scott Ritter, he just really hates that ideology, and that's very well placed. But a lot of these people that are in Ukraine now, they follow and they admire and they love Bandera. So it's a bad mark for the rest of the Ukrainians that probably without this coercement, they would never be a part of such an ideology, of massacring people just because you believe that you're the master race. Boy, and I'll tell you, even the Germans were kind of frightened from these Ukrainians. Not all Ukrainians, these Ukrainians. Yeah, but back to Elon Musk. He was saying that Crimea has always belonged to Russia, which is true. and it was only administratively part of. He didn't say that, but the truth is, it's only was administratively part of of Ukraine. And Ukraine didn't even become a country until 1991, for a very short time, of course, up until now. So before that, it was the region of Ukraine. And another thing you have to realize is most of the leaders of the Soviet Union were Ukrainian, the vast majority by far. So it's not just Khrushchev and Brezhnev who ran the Soviet Union for most of its history. Of course, Stalin was from Georgia, and the Georgians, for some reason today, hate the Russians and blame their problems on Russia, just like the Ukrainians blame their problems today on Russia, when in fact, during the Soviet Union, the leaders were normally always Ukrainian. So, that's a little bit misplaced hatred there. And some that weren't pure Ukrainian, they were part Ukrainian, and some of them even said they're Russian when in fact they are Ukrainian. I can't remember, it was Andropov or Chernenko. You have to look that up yourself. There's actually information out there that shows that most all of the leaders of the Soviet Union had at least some Ukrainian blood in them. So that their hatred is misplaced in saying that the Russian blood is bad and you have to kill off Russians. I don't think Elon Musk mentioned anything about those in the Donbass, but I think he would probably agree that since Ukraine was bombing those people for 8 years and killed around 14,000 civilians, which was totally ignored from the United States and all these countries, even though that it was the agreement for them to stop, which was in the Minsk Accords, was signed by France and Germany. They just ignored all these murders. And Petro Poroshenko, as I mentioned in another video, he came out and said that when the Ukrainian children will all be going to school, the children in the Donbass will all be hiding in their basement. And he said he only signed the Minsk Accords to buy time so that NATO can build up their military to be used to attack Donbass and Russia. So this was all to make a powerful military, and in that 8 years, Ukraine built up the second most powerful military in NATO, besides the United States, of course. Actually, Turkey is more. I'm talking about the military in Europe. Turkey is the more powerful NATO military in Europe, and Ukraine, in a very short period of time, became the second most powerful. And you might even want to say that actually, in some ways, they're even more powerful because the U.S. Was aiding them in every way with satellite coverage and leadership. By the way, as a matter of fact, there's even videos out there where Americans are saying that they're already in Ukraine. There's a lot of U.S. soldiers in Ukraine right now, and I'm sure you already know that, but it's just not officially announced if you're following real news coverage. Elon Musk also said that the referendum should be retaken, which is a fair guesstimate, because Zaporozhye only, I don't know, I think it's even less than half the people actually voted. And of course they voted overwhelmingly to be a part of Russia. But the city of Zaporozhye is probably more than 40% of the entire region of Zaporozhye. I don't know, but that's the vast majority of the people, and I don't think that they even had a chance to vote. That's under Ukrainian control, so you have to take that into consideration. But this whole strategy from the West is to bleed Russia white, but it's turning out that it's actually bleeding NATO white, because they're running out of weapons, and and running out of money. And if you look, they're going to have rolling blackouts in certain areas, such as in Paris, where they're going to be shutting the electricity off and all. So you have to wonder who is getting bled white here. And then you consider the costs in lives. It's undeniable that Ukraine has lost vastly more lives than the Russians have. At the very beginning, of course, the Russians were losing more lives, and the entire operation here, that Russia's been trying to preserve as much life as possible, particularly Russian lives, but also civilian lives, because they don't really see Ukrainians as being inferior or the enemy at all. As Putin has also admitted, on quite a few occasions that he's not at war against Ukraine, and that's apparent as well. He's at war against the collective power of NATO and the West. And unfortunately, they are using the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian land as their battleground to bleed Russia white. So this is just an attack to go against Russia. And as you know, the World Economic Forum has a vendetta against Russia, and Russia knows this. And Vladimir Putin has been mentioning that in some of the later speeches, that it's these oligarchs, these globalists, that are actually declaring war against Russia. So if you're against the World Economic Forum and what they propose for you to own nothing and be happy, your savior is actually Vladimir Putin. So you might not think that right now, but the evidence points that way. That's undeniable. The West is also saying that Putin said he's going to use nuclear weapons, and of course that's not true. Putin has not threatened at all to use nuclear weapons. It's actually the West that's threatening to use nuclear weapons against Vladimir Putin or against Russia. And what they're doing right now, and what a lot of people are suspecting, and I didn't originally see this, I got this from watching some other vlogs, is that they are probably preparing everybody for a false flag nuclear attack that will be blamed on Russia. And I was thinking, that sounds about right, and it really does. If you remember, if anybody out there can help me out on this, because I remember, but I don't remember the year, and I don't remember necessarily the incident when some nuclear bomb disappeared in the United States, and I believe it was in Louisiana, but I'm not sure. It might even be two nuclear bombs, but I know that one nuclear bomb just disappeared and they never found a trace of it. So they're wondering whatever happened to this nuclear bomb. So, you might see this resurface, or it's not going to be said that this is that nuclear bomb. But we all have to pray that the United States and the collective West are not going to be using a nuclear weapon in Ukraine and then blame it on Russia. Because the last thing that Russia would do is set off a nuclear bomb right next door. I'll tell you, if Russia was going to use a nuclear bomb, which they not said they were going to do, they would probably do it on the other side of the world, more like the United States, because they know who is responsible for this war against them, or actually this provocation that provoked Russia into defending themselves, against these Ukrainians that were obviously going to attack Russia. And, that's undeniable. And, who did Nord Stream 2? Everybody knows who did that. Who has been threatening to do something just exactly that for all this time. But another piece of information that I just heard about, Gazprom put this out, and I guess there are two pipes of Nord Stream 2 that go from Russia. I think they call it A and B, if I am not mistaken. And only one of these pipes was actually substantially damaged. The other one has minimal damage, and they can repair this and get it up and running in a very short period of time. So if that's true, it's still possible that Germany can get Russian gas, at least in the very near future, before the worst part of the winter sets in, or before all of their gas supplies run out. And I guess they're saying now that it should run out in about February. Apparently in this September they've used much more gas than they did last September. So it's still all predictions, and who knows how long all this stuff is going to last. But it's something for you to watch. And as they say, they say that Vladimir Putin has weaponized gas deliveries. So he's going to be weaponizing other things. But if you think about this, who weaponized anything? And who started all this? Who started all this? Who started by weaponizing banking, weaponizing finance? And it was they weaponized insurance. They weaponized shipping against Russia. They weaponized air travel against Russia. They weaponized transportation, as in trains or automobile coverage there. They weaponized tourism. They weaponized sports. They weaponized music. All parts of culture. They even weaponized food deliveries. All, what's allowed to be exported and imported. So who weaponized everything against Russia, and Russia actually never really even did weaponize gas deliveries. So, this Nord Stream 1 about this maintenance work, but guess what? Nord Stream 2 is all ready to go. Russia said it's ready to go. All they have to do is push a button. So is that weaponizing? Is that weaponizing gas? They never raised the price of gas. They never stopped the delivery. I don't know what they mean by weaponizing gas. I think this is all fantasy, and you can expect all this stuff from the West. None of this stuff really ever makes any sense anyway. But we all just have to hope that they're not going to be using any kind of a nuclear weapon and then saying Putin did it, as everything is. Putin did it! Putin did it! So if this comes about, we're all going to lose. It's not going to be Russia losing or the West. It's the West thinks that they're going to win this by causing some sort of a damage to Russia, maybe their image, or putting the blame on a bomb. And I think a lot of people are a lot smarter than that. They realize who's doing all of this stuff. So I think this might backfire as well. But right now, as everybody's saying, well, a lot of people are saying, right now, collectively, you have some of the stupidest leaders ever in history that are in the West. And they got rid of Boris Johnson, and now they got Liz Truss, and a lot of people are saying she's not going to last October. She's going to be gone before October because she's worse than Boris Johnson. How many governments have fallen? There's going to be more. So these are a bunch of, I don't know, I hate to call them idiots, but I think what they did is they took a risk, and the United States promised they're going to collapse Russia and that they can come and get the spoils. They can get gas for next to nothing, and so on and so forth. Fertilizer, uranium, everything that Russia is the main supplier of. Actually, uranium, I think it's only 15% of the world's uranium, but they still need it to power nuclear. And it might be interesting to note that, well, when you think about who started all this, they're going to say, oh, Russia invaded Ukraine. But however, who was pushed into invading Ukraine? You'd have to look at the history of that. That's a whole nother topic. Russia's not allowed to have any security arrangements. So anyway, so Russia did exactly what they said they're going to do. And but when you go back, and at the very beginning, when it was the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, they had Boris Yeltsen was the first leader there, and right away when Bill Clinton, who was president, they kept absorbing countries. They were absorbing countries into NATO, and Boris Yeltsin said, well, wait a minute, we made this agreement that said you're not going to move 1 inch eastward. And Bill Clinton told Boris Yeltsin, we lied. So they kept absorbing more and more countries. I think there was 8 expansions of NATO. I'm not even sure if that was the first one with Bill Clinton, but they just kept expanding, more and more eastward. And that's how it actually all started. And I think in the later days of Boris Yeltsin, he's not so bad as you think, because he appointed Vladimir Putin to be come after him. And Putin, I believe, is a lawyer as well as he has a PhD in economics, so he knows his stuff. Vladimir Putin is a real sharp cookie. Everybody will say that. I don't think you can find anybody nobody says that Vladimir Putin is a dummy. I can't say that about Joe Biden or Olaf Scholz, the leader of Germany right now, or a lot of these other leaders, Liz Truss, or you can just rattle off all of them, but not Vladimir Putin. He's no dummy. But it might be right to say, from at least my perspective, is Vladimir Putin is Boris Yeltsin's revenge. So right now the West feels the wrath of Boris Yeltsin because he assigned Vladimir Putin to be the next leader, and essentially Putin has been in control of Russia ever since. So that's something to consider. That's my perspective, and I'm sure you can't really deny that either. I'm sure you'll believe it, at least to a certain extent. So till next time, stay safe.